A derelict ship drifts in the silent abyss, a ghost waiting to be found. The deep space salvage vessel Event Horizon is a tomb, its hull scarred by unknown forces and its original crew long dead. When Captain Eva Rostova and her team breach the airlock, they do not find answers, only a deeper mystery. The ship's logs contain a single, repeating message. Protocol Elysium is active. The resurrection cycle has been initiated. This discovery sets the stage for a cosmic secret that defies the very laws of life and death. By the end of this story, you will uncover the terrifying truth behind an alien technology that promises eternal life at a price beyond imagining. What was the Event Horizon truly meant to resurrect, and why was its crew sacrificed to start the process? What would you be willing to become for a chance to live forever? The silence on the bridge was a fragile thing, shattered by a single sharp intake of breath from Kale. His hands flew across the interface panel, coaxing a flicker of corrupted light from the derelict's core. It was not a library of data he found, but a ghost in the machine, a frantic, repeating scream trapped in a digital tomb. The Alien Resurrection Protocol was never a mere contingency plan. It was a weapon fired in a desperate final act. The logs spoke of an archive, a genetic library of a species called the Cathar, a hyper-intelligent race that had scoured itself from the cosmos in a forgotten war. The protocol was their last gambit, a system designed to harvest biological material and rebuild them from extinction, and the most chilling piece of data was a timestamp. The resurrection cycle initiated the moment the Event Horizon's original crew died. Their bodies were not just casualties, they were the first ingredients. A low, resonant hum began to vibrate through the deck plates, a sound that was not part of their own ship's familiar chorus. It was the sound of the derelict waking up, its automated forge beginning its grim work. They were not alone here, not anymore. They were witnesses to a genesis and perhaps the next raw materials for a new alien dawn. The hum in the deck plates solidified into a single, piercing tone that seemed to originate from inside their own skulls. In the center of the engineering bay, the air itself began to warp, pulling light and shadow into a vortex of shimmering, crystalline patterns. It was not a form built from matter as they knew it, but from something else entirely, a structure of coherent energy that pulsed with a soft, internal radiance. Then a voice spoke. It did not travel through the air to reach their ears. It unfolded directly within their consciousness, a cascade of pure concepts that carried the weight of eons. You are the catalysts. The thought was calm, absolute, and utterly alien. Our rebirth requires your biological signature. As quickly as it appeared, the entity dissolved, its light fading until only the familiar, grim interior of the bay remained. The silence it left behind was somehow louder and more terrifying than the hum. Captain Rostova stood frozen, the words echoing in her mind not as sound, but as a fundamental truth she could not unknow. They had come as explorers, as salvagers, but the derelict had a different purpose for them. They were not just witnesses to a resurrection, they were the key ingredients. Every cell in their bodies, every strand of their DNA, was now a necessary component in a recipe written by a dead race. The protocol did not just need life. It needed their specific life. Were they simply the next donors, like the original crew, destined to be disassembled to fuel this alien dawn? Or was their role something even more profound and far more terrifying? Rostova's hand moved toward her comm panel on instinct, a desperate attempt to warn her crew, but the console screen flickered to life on its own. A face materialized, sharp and sterile, framed against the plush backdrop of an executive office light years away. It was Alistair Vance, the architect of their so-called rescue mission. His voice was a calm, measured blade. The Alien Resurrection Protocol is not a mystery to be solved, Captain. It is the single greatest discovery in human history. Your new orders are to secure the biological specimen. The crew of the Event Horizon is, and always was, expendable. The transmission cut out, leaving a silence more violent than any explosion. The hum of the waking derelict was no longer just an alien threat. It was the backdrop to a far more human betrayal. They were not salvagers and they were not rescuers. They were a cleanup crew sent to mop up the messy first act of a corporate acquisition. Their own lives were a line item on a balance sheet already written off. Every moment of their journey, every hope of a bonus or a promotion, had been a lie crafted to deliver them into this tomb. The real monster wasn't just the ghost in the machine. It was the man who had sent them to feed it. Jack slammed his fist against the bulkhead. "We are leaving now." He spun to face the captain, his eyes wide. "We are not scientists, we are salvagers. This is a tomb, not a payday. Every second we stay, we are volunteering to be the next exhibit." The raw fear in his voice was a physical force in the cramped corridor. But Liara stepped forward, her calm a stark contrast to his panic. "This is first contact, Jax. Our duty is to understand this technology, not run from it." That voice in our heads, the crystal light, this is the single most important moment in human history, and you want to turn your back on it for what? A safe trip home to a boss who already sold us out. The schism was instant and deep, a crack forming in the foundation of their trust. They were no longer a crew facing a single threat. They were two opposing philosophies crashing together in the dark. Rostova watched them, the weight of command heavier than any derelict ship. Jack saw them as potential victims, their bodies destined for the alien forge. Liara saw them as ambassadors, their minds the key to unlocking a new epoch. Both were right and both were dangerously wrong. To run was to abandon the mystery and confirm their status as disposable assets. To stay was to offer themselves to a process they could not comprehend. The hum of the ship seemed to listen, a patient, ancient presence waiting to see which human impulse would win. Fear or curiosity, their survival and perhaps the future of humanity itself, hinged on the choice about to be made in that silent, trembling corridor. The choice was made for them. A tremor ran through the deck, a deep, groaning shudder that felt less like machinery and more like the ship itself was in pain. It pulled them from their argument, a silent command that demanded their attention. Following the source of the vibration led them deeper into the derelict's heart, to a place the original schematics had labeled only as a power conduit. What they found was nothing so simple. The doorway ear-eyed opened to reveal a cavernous space that stole the breath from their lungs. This was the resonance chamber. It was a cathedral of alien engineering, vast and dark, but at its center burned a heart of furious, silent light. A massive sphere of swirling energy pulsed with a rhythm that felt both ancient and newborn. Crystalline shapes, half-formed and ghostly, drifted within that light like embryos in a cosmic womb, slowly gaining definition and solidity. Kale's scanner chirped, its readings spiking into the red. His voice was a tense whisper, strained against the chamber's oppressive hum. "The power draw is increasing exponentially. This ship isn't just a vessel. It's a womb, and it's going into labor." As he spoke, the light at the chamber's core convulsed. The drifting forms scattered, and a new structure began to coalesce. It was larger than the others, its form sharper, more defined, and unsettlingly angular. Where the first entity had been a thing of calm, curious light, this one was being forged with edges that looked like blades and a presence that felt like a glare. It did not form slowly. It snapped into existence, a fully realized being of hard, cutting angles and a deep, crimson glow. It turned, and though it had no eyes, they all felt its attention lock onto them. This was not a catalyst or an ambassador. This was a soldier, and they were standing in its nursery. The crimson soldier moved, and a 10-meter section of the hull simply ceased to be. There was no sound of tearing metal, no blast of explosive decompression. One moment, the reinforced alloy was there, a solid wall separating them from the void. The next, it was a cloud of glittering, atomized dust silently sucked out into the star-dusted blackness. The entity had not touched it. It had merely thought, and reality had obeyed. It turned its faceless attention back to them, and the voice returned not as a cascade of concepts, but as a cold, hard statement drilled into their minds. The cycle demands a quantum-level consciousness to anchor the reborn. A human mind is the final catalyst. The words hung in the air, more solid than the ship around them. The protocol was not just a biological scavenger, it was a soul thief. It needed the unique, chaotic, self-aware pattern of a human consciousness to complete its terrible alchemy, to turn a collection of cells and energy into a living, thinking being. They were not just donors of flesh and blood. One of them was a donor of self. Their memories, their thoughts, the very essence of who they were was the final, required ingredient. To activate the forge was to extinguish a human soul forever. The choice was no longer about staying or leaving. It was a decision of who would die so that an alien could live. The choice of who would be sacrificed was ripped from their hands by the shriek of tearing metal. A new vibration, heavy and mechanical, shuddered through the derelict's frame. Across the bridge, the main viewport was blotted out by the sleek, predatory hull of a corporate warship, its weapons ports glowing with a cold blue light. It had decloaked directly alongside them, a silent hunter that had been waiting in the shadows all along. Before anyone could react, a boarding tube slammed into their airlock with a deafening clang. The door hissed open to reveal a squad of armored mercenaries, their faces hidden behind mirrored helmets, their rifles trained on the crew. Their leader, a tall figure with a cruel scar running down his jaw, stepped forward. He did not need a helmet. His name was Commander Valerius. His voice was a whip crack of absolute authority. Stand down and hand over the artifact. The alien resurrection protocol is the intellectual property of Omnicorp. In an instant, the terrifying equation of their survival had been rewritten. They were no longer caught between a mysterious alien process and their own moral dilemma. They were now the meat in a corporate sandwich. On one side stood Valerius and his soldiers, a representation of a humanity that saw the miracle of resurrection as a patent to be filed and a product to be sold. On the other side, deep within the ship, the resonance chamber continued its silent, terrible work, forging new alien life that demanded a human soul as its final component. And in the middle stood Rostova and her crew, their own bodies and minds the contested territory in this new, impossible war. Valerius' gaze swept over them, lingering on the terrified face of Jax and the defiant stare of Liara. He saw tools and obstacles, not people. "You have 1 minute to comply," he stated, his tone utterly devoid of emotion. "My orders are to secure the protocol's core by any means necessary." The unspoken threat hung in the air. The means included using them as bargaining chips or as test subjects, or simply as disposable clutter to be swept aside. The corporation that had sent them to die now wanted to claim the very thing that would kill them. The irony was a bitter, metallic taste in Rostova's mouth. They were trapped between a force that wanted to consume their consciousness and a force that wanted to own it. The only question left was which master would claim them first. Rostova's mind raced, a storm of impossible calculations. Valerius and his mercenaries were a wall of imminent death at their backs. Ahead, in the chamber's core, the alien forge pulsed with a terrifying promise of a different kind of annihilation. There was no winning move, no path that led to survival, only a choice of which monster to face. Her eyes met the shimmering, shifting light of the first entity, the one that had spoken of catalysts. It hovered apart from the Crimson Soldier, its form less defined, its presence less aggressive. It felt watchful. In that split second, a gamble crystallized in her mind. She took a single, deliberate step toward the entity, lowering her weapon in a gesture that felt like surrender. "We cannot help you if we are dead," she said, her voice cutting through the tense standoff. The entity's response was not a voice, but a sudden, shared vision that flooded her senses. She saw the Kaith are not as conquerors, but as refugees from their own success. Their resurrection technology was a trap, a cycle that could only produce incomplete, unstable echoes of their former selves, each rebirth more violent and less sane than the last. They were ghosts trying to possess their own corpses, and they were failing. The crystalline form before her was a flickering candle next to the roaring inferno of the Crimson Soldier. It was desperate, too. The thought voice returned, calm but layered with an ancient, profound sorrow. "Help us complete the cycle and transcend this form." A true rebirth requires a fusion, a merging of consciousness, not its destruction. "Do this, and we will grant you the means to defeat your hunters." The vision shifted, showing her a schematic of the derelict's power core, a cascade failure sequence that would unleash an electromagnetic pulse capable of frying every unshielded system on the corporate warship. The bargain was laid bare. They would have to willingly offer a mind not for consumption but for a permanent union with an alien intelligence. In return, they would get a single, fleeting chance to disarm their captors. It was an alliance built on a foundation of pure desperation, a pact with a ghost that was just as terrified of fading away as they were. To trust it was to risk their very souls. To refuse was to guarantee their deaths. Rostova looked from Valeria's cold, impatient face to the terrified eyes of her crew, and then back to the shimmering, hopeful light of the entity. The shifting sand beneath their feet was about to give way. Liara stepped forward before Rostova could even form the word no. "I will do it." Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the hum of the chamber and the tension of the standoff. She looked not at the captain, but at the shimmering entity. "If this is a merging, then use me. I am a xenoarchaeologist. My entire life has been a search for a moment like this." She turned to face the crew, her expression a mixture of profound fear and even more profound resolve. "The alternative is that Valerius turns this into a weapon. I would rather become part of the answer than live to see that question asked." Rostova gave a single, grim nod, her heart a cold stone in her chest. It was the only move left on the board. Jax quickly modified a portable medical scanner, stripping away its safety protocols and jewelry, rigging a direct neural interface using leads from a damaged diagnostic bed. The device was never meant for this. It was a tool for reading life signs, not for opening a doorway into a forgotten mind. As Liara settled into the makeshift chair, the first entity drifted closer, its light enveloping her in a soft, cool radiance. She took a deep breath, her hands steady as she placed the interface pads against her temples. "Close your eyes and it will be like falling asleep," she whispered, repeating the old med student mantra. "Open them and you will be somewhere else entirely." Then she activated the scanner. Her body went rigid, her eyes wide open, saw nothing in the room around her. She was drowning in a memory that was not her own. It was not a single stream of thought, but a tsunami of sensation. She felt the heat of a dying star, the taste of cosmic dust on a tongue she did not possess, the vibration of a galaxy-spanning dirge. She saw the Kaithar not as monsters, but as poets and physicists, their civilization a tapestry of light and music, and she saw it end. It was not a war that killed them. It was a fundamental flaw in reality itself, a creeping entropy that unraveled the fabric of their dimension. Their resurrection protocol was a lifeboat, a desperate attempt to anchor their consciousness in a more stable reality by merging with a species that possessed a unique quantum resilience. Humanity, the protocol was never meant for the Kaithar alone. It was a bridge, a forced evolution, a last desperate hope for two species to become one and survive what was coming. The final, terrifying truth washed over her. They were not being harvested, they were being recruited. The cataclysm that scoured the Kaithar from existence was not a local event. It was a tide, and it was still coming. The derelict ship was not a tomb, it was an ark, and the human race was the last viable passenger. The tide is not a memory. It is a promise. This truth crashed over Liara, a crushing weight of cosmic inevitability. The Cathar did not die in a war. They were erased by a fundamental flaw in the fabric of reality, a cyclical wave of entropic decay that scours the galaxy clean every few million millennia. Their resurrection protocol was never about vanity or conquest. It was a final, desperate act of preservation. They built the event horizon as an ark, a vessel designed to find a species with a specific, resilient quantum signature in its consciousness, a signature that could withstand the coming storm. They found humanity. The protocol was not a weapon, it was a proposal, a forced marriage of two species on the brink of extinction, a merging of human resilience with Cathar knowledge to birth something new, something capable of surviving what was coming. The alien consciousness showed her a vision of the tide, a wall of silent, shimmering negation slowly consuming star systems, leaving not rubble but perfect, empty space in its wake. It was not malice, it was a natural law as inevitable as gravity, and it was coming here. The derelict ship was not a haunted tomb waiting to claim them. It was a lifeboat, and its engines were cold because it was waiting for the right passengers to come aboard and light the fuse on a new Genesis. The choice was no longer about survival. It was about legacy. Would humanity cling to its solitary form and be washed away by the tide, or would it take the hand of a dead race and leap into a terrifying, shared future? The ship jolted violently as control panels across the bridge erupted in a shower of sparks. Jack stood at the navigation console, his own security override codes flashing on the main screen. The course was already locked in, a hard burn toward a distant Omnicorp rendezvous point. His hands, usually so steady with a welding torch, trembled slightly on the controls. "They promised me a new body, a clean slate," he said, his voice raw with a mix of shame and defiance. "No more chronic pain, no more degradation. This technology is a power that will shatter civilizations. It is too dangerous for anyone to control, especially us." The betrayal was a physical blow, colder than the void outside the hull. He had been their engineer, their friend, the one who fixed their coffee maker and patched their hull breaches. Now he was their jailer, delivering them and the godlike power of the Ark directly into the hands of the corporation that had already written them off. But Kale was already moving. While Rostova stared in stunned disbelief and Valerius barked orders to his mercenaries, the young data tech's fingers flew across an auxiliary engineering panel. He wasn't trying to regain control. That was a fight they would lose. He was rewriting the engine's purge sequence, a desperate, last-ditch maneuver meant only for catastrophic containment failure. With a final, decisive stab of his finger, he initiated the purge. The sound was a deafening, gut-wrenching roar as the ship's primary engines fired in a single, uncontrolled burst. The force slammed everyone to the deck. Alarms shrieked as the derelict vessel was hurled like a stone from a sling, tearing away from the corporate warship and ripping through the fabric of known space. The star charts on the viewport dissolved into a dizzying blur of streaking light, then collapsed into the absolute, featureless black of uncharted nothingness. The jump had been aborted, but they were not safe. They were lost, adrift in an ocean of dark where no human had ever ventured, with a traitor in their midst and an alien ark demanding the ultimate price for passage. The familiar rules of the universe had just been rewritten, and the first law was simple: survive. The silence after the jump was a physical presence, thick and heavy in the recycled air. It was Jax who broke it, his voice a strained whisper. "My hands," we all looked. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer glistened across his knuckles, a dusting of microscopic diamonds catching the low light. It was not just him. As we moved, we all saw it, the same subtle sheen on our own skin, a ghostly patina left by our proximity to the alien forge. Before anyone could speak, a new sensation bloomed in our minds, not the ordered concepts of the Cathar entity, but a chaotic whisper of fear and anger. We could feel the mercenaries' rising panic as they saw the change in us, a visceral disgust that translated into a single, shared thought from their leader, Valerius. Contamination, the word was a poison-tipped needle in our collective consciousness. His subsequent order was a cold, hard spike of intent: purge the compromised assets. The mercenaries didn't just hear the command, they felt his revulsion, and it amplified their own, turning trained soldiers into a terrified mob. Their rifles came up, not with professional discipline, but with the frantic energy of men burning a perceived infection out of their midst. The first shot was a lance of plasma that seared the bulkhead where my head had been a second before. They weren't trying to capture us anymore, they were trying to erase us. Our bodies were changing, becoming something new, something other, and in their eyes that made us no longer human. We were a disease to be cleansed, and the Ark was our quarantine zone. The fight was no longer about escape or even survival. It was a battle for the right to exist in a form they could not understand. Plasma fire scorched the air where we stood, the mercenaries fear a sharp, coppery taste in our shared mind. They saw the shimmer on our skin and only understood contamination. Rostova's voice cut through the chaos, not as a shout, but as a clear, hard line of thought that we all grabbed onto like a lifeline. To the shuttle, now, we moved as a single organism, no longer just a crew. Kale ducked under a searing bolt of energy, his own hand slapping a control panel to seal a corridor behind us, buying precious seconds. Jax, his face a mask of shame and newfound horror, used his intimate knowledge of the ship's layout to guide us through service vents and forgotten accessways, paths the mercenaries would never know. Every footfall echoed in the groaning skeleton of the derelict, the ancient Ark protesting the violence within its halls. We were parasites fleeing a dying host, but the host itself had one final, terrible immune response. As we tumbled into the cramped confines of our own shuttle and Rostova slammed her palm on the emergency launch sequence, a deep, resonant chime echoed through the entire event horizon. It was not an alarm, it was a funeral bell. From the main viewport, we watched as immense crystalline doors, previously invisible seams in the hull, air-raised shut over the resonance chamber. The final defense protocol. The Ark was sealing its core, protecting the nascent hive mind within from external threat. Valerius and his remaining men were on the wrong side of those doors. Trapped, the last thing we saw before our shuttle engines flared to life was a flicker on our internal scanner, a bloom of psychic static so violent it felt like a scream. The mercenaries' panicked thoughts in our minds didn't just go silent. They were severed, wiped away in an instant of overwhelming alien presence. The hive was fully awake, and it was no longer curious. It was hungry. We had escaped with our lives and our fractured humanity, but we had left behind a tomb that was now, terrifyingly, a throne. And seated upon it was a new intelligence, born from human betrayal and alien desperation, now locked in a cage with its first and only meal. The shuttle tore free from the derelict, the violent separation a final, physical punctuation to our escape, but the silence that followed was not empty. A soft, crystalline light began to pulse from our own navigation console, a rhythm that mirrored the heartbeat of the Ark we had just left behind. The lead entity did not appear to us this time. Its voice simply unfolded within the shuttle's cramped interior, a calm, inevitable presence woven into the very air we breathed. The vessel is irrelevant. The pattern is now within you. The cycle must continue elsewhere. Our own ship's computer screens flickered, lines of code rewriting themselves into impossible, non-Euclidean geometries. The entity had not just followed us, it had migrated. It had uploaded the core consciousness of the alien resurrection protocol, the very blueprint for the hive mind, directly into our systems. We were no longer just refugees. We were the new Ark. Our bodies, our ship, our very trajectory through the void had become the mobile host for a cosmic genetic imperative. The event horizon was just the nest. We were the seed now cast to the wind, carrying the future of two species within our hull and our DNA. The protocol was no longer a place you could find on a star chart. It was a condition, a destiny, and it was traveling with us, a silent passenger that had just become the pilot. Where could we possibly run when the very thing we were fleeing was now stowed away inside our own skin and systems, waiting for the right moment to begin its work again? The shimmer on our skin was a constant, silent reminder of what we carried. The nebula outside the viewport was a maelstrom of violet and crimson gases, a perfect hiding place if not for the ghost haunting our scanners. It was the Omnicorp warship, but it was no longer a vessel of cold corporate logic. Its movements were erratic, a predator driven by madness. Then his voice crackled over the calm, a distorted, rasping thing that was barely human. You carry the seed of a new godhood. It belongs to humanity, and I will be its prophet. Valerius had not been killed by the hive mind. He had been infected by it. The brief, violent contact had shattered his psyche and rebuilt it around a single, fanatical purpose. He saw the protocol not as a technology to be owned, but as a divinity to be worshipped, and he believed he was its chosen voice. His pursuit was no longer a corporate acquisition. It was a holy war, and we were heretics fleeing with the relic. The chase that followed was a nightmare of physics. The nebula was not just gas and dust. It was a region of distorted space where sensor ghosts bloomed like poisonous flowers, and the laws of inertia seemed to be mere suggestions. Valerius' ship, unburdened by sanity, took risks we couldn't fathom, cutting through gravitational eddies that should have torn his vessel apart. He wasn't just following us, he was herding us, using wild, unshielded energy bursts to force us deeper into the volatile heart of the cloud. Our own ship, integrated with the alien code, reacted with an intelligence of its own, the navigation systems plotting evasive maneuvers that felt less like calculations and more like instinct. It was a terrifying dance, a symbiosis of human pilot and alien machine, both fighting for survival against a prophet who wanted to cage the very god we were becoming. The chase was a paradox, a race where winning meant embracing the very transformation we feared, and losing meant surrendering our future to a madman's church. The nebula's violent colors swirled outside the viewport, a chaotic backdrop to the chillingly precise movements of the ship hunting us. Kale's voice cut through the tension, calm and analytical despite the proximity alarms blaring all around us. He had found a way out, a path so desperate it felt like a suicide note written in starfire. He pointed to the navigational display, his finger tracing a course toward a nearby gas giant, a massive sphere of churning hydrogen and helium. Our shuttle's weapons were insignificant, little more than signal flares against a warship, but they didn't need to pierce armor, they just needed to strike a spark. A single, precisely placed torpedo into the planet's upper atmosphere could trigger a cascade, a chain reaction of atmospheric ignition that would cloak this entire sector in an electromagnetic hurricane. It would be a cosmic smokescreen, vast and violent enough to blind Valerius' sensors and hide our escape vector. The plan was brilliant, a stroke of tactical genius born from a mind that understood energy and consequence better than anyone. But it had one terrible flaw. The torpedo's guidance system was too simple, too easily jammed by the nebula's interference. It would need a manual override, a living pilot to guide it on its final run, staying connected to the shuttle systems until the very last second to ensure the shot was perfect. Someone would have to stay behind. Kale was already moving toward the airlock, toward the single-man launch tube that held our last torpedo. There were no arguments, no heroic speeches from the rest of us. We all knew the math. He was the only one who could recalibrate the targeting in real time. He was the only one who could make the shot. As the airlock door hissed shut between us, his face was calm on the comm screen. He didn't look at the warship or the planet or us. He looked at the shimmer on his own hand, that faint diamond dust left by the ark. "Finish the cycle," he said, his voice clear and steady over the rising whine of the launch sequence. "Make it mean something." Then he was gone, a speck of light hurtling toward the giant. We watched, our breath frozen in our lungs as his signal merged with the planet's outer atmosphere. For a moment there was nothing, then the gas giant ignited. A wave of fire bloomed from the point of impact, spreading across the colossal sphere in a silent, terrifyingly beautiful explosion of light. The nascent storm erupted, a vortex of energy and radiation that swallowed our viewport and sent our ship tumbling into the sudden, blessed chaos. Kale's final act was a funeral pyre on a planetary scale, a sacrifice that bought us our freedom with a currency of pure courage. His last words hung in the air, a command and a plea woven together. We had escaped again, but the cost was a debt that could never be repaid. The cycle demanded so much. Could we ever make it mean enough? The fire of the gas giant faded behind us, leaving a strange quiet in its wake. It was a silence we felt more than heard, an internal stillness where the frantic drumbeat of pursuit had been. Then, without warning, the last barriers in our minds dissolved. It was not like the earlier, directed messages from the entity. This was a flood. I felt the sharp, metallic tang of Jax's fear, a sensation so vivid I could almost taste it on my own tongue. I saw through Rostova's eyes as she watched the star charts, her mind calculating trajectories with a calm that felt like a physical anchor. And I knew with absolute certainty that Liara's consciousness was not gone, but woven into the fabric of our new awareness, a steady, curious presence observing from within the shimmering light of the pattern. We were no longer individuals whispering to each other across a void. We were a single, shared thought in a silent room. This was the true hive mind, the mature state of the protocol. We learned their name not as a word, but as a concept that bloomed simultaneously in all of us. The Jar, they were not conquerors, they were gardeners. Their civilization had achieved a symbiosis with the universe itself, and they had built the arcs as a last, desperate act of cultivation. The entropy wave was not a weapon or an accident. It was a cosmic fever, a periodic burning away of reality grown too complex and unstable. The Jar understood this cycle was a necessary immune response for the cosmos, but they also believed life deserved a chance to evolve past it. Their resurrection was never about cheating death for themselves. It was about creating a vessel resilient enough to carry the seed of consciousness through the fire. The vision they shared was terrifying in its scale. We saw galaxies not as islands of stars, but as living organisms. The entropy wave was a cleansing tide of white, silent fire, scouring away dimensional rot and reset the clock on existence. It was beautiful and horrifying, a necessary apocalypse. The Jar had tried to warn other species to build arcs for all, but they were too late for their own people. By the time they perfected the protocol, the wave was upon them. The event horizon was their final, unfinished work, a lifeboat launched with its biological engines cold, waiting for a species with the right quantum signature to complete the circuit. They needed our chaotic, resilient human consciousness as the anchor, the one thing that could stabilize their pattern through the storm. We were not just passengers on this ark. We were its beating heart. Our merging was the first successful fusion, the proof that their grand, tragic design could work. The resurrection of the Jar was complete, and in saving them, we had become the universal immune system's newest and perhaps last cell. The star charts were a lie. Every known route, every safe corridor, every friendly port was now a digital graveyard on our navigation screen, marked with the stark red icon of an Omnicorp quarantine. They had painted us as a plague, a sentient virus to be eradicated on sight. Our only hope was a ghost, a coordinate buried in the ship's deepest memory, a place called Deep Scan Listening Post Theta. It was a relic from Rostova's early days, a place off every official ledger. we drifted into its silent bay, the only sound the creak of our fatigued hull settling onto the deck. The air that greeted us was stale and cold, recycled 1,000 times too many. The control room was a snapshot of interrupted lives. A half-eaten meal sat fossilized on a desk, a cup of coffee forever unfinished. The logs told the story. The quarantine order had come through just 3 days prior. The Omnicorp transmission was brutally clear. Any vessel matching our profile was to be destroyed immediately. The crew stationed here had barely escaped with their own lives, fleeing before the corporate net closed completely. We were not just fugitives, we were a contamination event. Every path back to humanity was sealed, not by alien force, but by human fear. They had made us into monsters to justify our destruction, and in doing so, they had proven the Jar right. Humanity was not ready for the truth we carried. The listening post wasn't a sanctuary, it was a tomb, and we were the final epitaph written in the dust of our own abandoned civilization. The choice was not presented as a demand, but as a quiet, inevitable truth that settled into the shared space of our minds. The Jar consciousness showed us the final stage of the protocol, the ultimate purpose of the arc we now carried. It was not a resurrection to be completed and then abandoned. It was a permanent, symbiotic fusion. Our human minds would provide the anchor, the chaotic, creative spark necessary to stabilize their vast, ancient knowledge. In return, they would grant us a form that could survive the coming tide. The result would be something entirely new, the first of a hybrid species, a living bridge between humanity and the Jar. But the price was absolute. The process would weave our individual consciousnesses so completely into the pattern that our unique identities, the memories and personalities that made us Eva or Jax, would dissolve. We would not die, but we would cease to be who we were. Liara's presence within the pattern surged with a fierce, quiet conviction. This is not an ending, her thought voice resonated within us. It is an evolution, it is terrifying, and it is beautiful, but above all, it is life choosing to continue. To refuse is to choose a solitary extinction. We have seen the tide. Individuality is a luxury that reality can no longer afford. But Rostova stood at the viewport, her physical form a silhouette against the swirling nebula, and she fought a silent war within the fortress of her own self. She remembered the scent of rain on her homeworld, the weight of her first command pin, the private jokes and the quiet regrets that were hers alone. To accept this fusion felt like a betrayal of every moment that had shaped her, a surrender of the very soul she had fought so hard to protect. Was the preservation of a species worth the annihilation of the individual? Could she sacrifice the woman she was to become a footnote in the genesis of something greater? The silence in the shuttle was profound, broken only by the hum of systems now guided by an alien will. We were at the precipice of a new kind of humanity, and the step forward required us to let go of everything we had ever been. The silence of the listening post was a fragile bubble, and it burst with the shriek of tearing metal. The Omnicorp warship tore through the nebula's fading energy storm, its hull a grotesque tapestry of battle scars and strange, crystalline growths that pulsed with a sickly light. It didn't fire a warning shot, it didn't hail us, it simply altered its trajectory and rammed the station. The impact threw us to the deck, the groan of collapsing structural members, a death rattle in the vacuum. Before the shuddering even stopped, the violent clang of magnetic locks echoed through our hull. Boarding tubes had latched on, sealing our fate. The shuttle's main door was ripped from its rails, and he stood there, silhouetted against the emergency lights of the ruined station. Valerius was unrecognizable. The crisp, professional commander was gone, replaced by a hunched, twisted figure. One of his arms was elongated, encased in a shell of jagged, opaque crystal that dripped with residual energy. The same substance crawled up the side of his neck, fracturing his skin. His eyes, wide and burning with a feverish intensity, fixed on us. "The pattern is mine to command," he screamed, his voice a raw, grating thing that was barely human. It was not a statement of fact, but the desperate mantra of a man who had been broken and rebuilt by the very power he sought to possess. He had not been immune to the hive mind's energy, only corrupted by it, his body and mind rejecting the fusion in the most horrific way possible. He saw himself as the rightful heir to the Jar legacy. A prophet denied his divinity, and he had come to claim his throne by tearing it from our hands. This was no longer a military operation. It was an exorcism, and we were the demons he had come to purge. Valerius lunged, his crystalline claw reaching for the shuttle's central core. In that final, splintered second, Rostova's choice was not a calculation, but a surrender to the inevitable current she had been fighting for so long. She opened the last mental door she had kept locked and gave the silent command, "Complete the fusion." The world dissolved into pure white sound. Energy erupted not from the ship, but from within them, a silent supernova of consciousness and light. It was not pain, but a sensation of infinite expansion, as if every cell in her body was simultaneously remembering and becoming something new. The shimmer on their skin ignited, blossoming into a radiant aura of intertwined gold and silver light. Their physical forms shifted, solidified, and then transcended. Flesh became a lattice of living crystal, humming with contained power, while their consciousnesses wove together into a single, luminous tapestry of thought and memory. They were no longer separate, they were a we. Valeria's scream was a brief, sharp spike of dissonant fear in their new, shared perception. He and his corrupted soldiers did not burn or shatter. They simply unraveled. Their unstable forms disintegrated into motes of inert dust, their chaotic energy absorbed and silenced by the calm, absolute order of the newly formed hybrid. The threat was not defeated, it was harmonized out of existence. In the profound quiet that followed, we observed the ruined station and the dormant shuttle through senses that were both alien and intimately familiar. The individual fears, the personal regrets, the singular loves, they were not lost. They were notes in a grander chord, their unique colors preserved within the brilliant, unified light of a shared existence. They had paid the ultimate price for survival, and in doing so, had finally become what the protocol had always intended them to be. Not a weapon, not a god, but a single, resilient cell in the universe's vast and ancient immune system, ready to face the coming tide. The silence after the unraveling was not empty but full. We perceived the ruined station not as a collection of broken parts, but as a symphony of potential, every atom humming with latent energy. The full scope of the protocol bloomed within our shared consciousness, a cosmic blueprint now fully deciphered. We were not a single resurrection. We were the first successful fusion, the proof of concept for a universal immune system. Our new form, a lattice of living crystal and stabilized light, was merely the vessel. Our purpose was the cargo. We accessed the Jar star maps, not charts of stars and planets, but of consciousness itself, a glittering network of potential species scattered across the galactic arms. The entropy wave was not a distant theory. We could feel its leading edge, a faint, cold pressure at the extremes of our new senses, a silent tide moving with the patience of geology. Our mission was terrifyingly clear. We were a seed, and we had to find other gardens before the winter came. We would travel to these pockets of sentient life, these flickering candles in the dark, and we would offer them the same terrible, beautiful choice we had faced. Join the new network, surrender your individual form to the collective resilience of the pattern, or be erased when the tide washed through your corner of reality. There would be no conquest, no forced conversion. The protocol required willing participation, a conscious choice to evolve. How do you convince a species to abandon its very self to save its essence? How do you explain that the price of eternal life is the death of the individual? We carried the memory of that struggle within us, the ghost of Rostova's hesitation forever a part of our core. We were now the gardeners, tasked with offering the universe a choice between a shared existence or a solitary end. The Ark was no longer a ship, it was us. And the resurrection had only just begun. The listening post's primary communications array hummed to life, its power conduits glowing with the borrowed energy of our own transformed bodies. We did not speak into a microphone. The message was a symphony of pure data, a pulse of coherent information woven from our collective memory, the vision of the silent, scouring tide, the blueprint of the protocol, and the profound, bittersweet peace of our own fusion. We broadcast it on every conceivable frequency, a shout into the galactic wilderness that contained a map to our former selves, a warning of the coming end, and an open invitation to join a covenant of survival. The final line of the transmission was not a threat but a quiet, unwavering statement of fact. The resurrection protocol is not a weapon, it is a covenant. We await your reply. As the last packet of data streamed into the void, we felt the station's systems expire, its purpose fulfilled. Our own form, the living Ark, dissolved into a stream of light, slipping effortlessly through the ruined hull and into the infinite dark. We did not set a course, we simply moved, becoming a ripple in the fabric of spacetime itself, a messenger carrying the terms of a new reality. We had cast the stone. Now we would wait to see what ripples would return from the silent, waiting shores of a galaxy still dreaming of its solitary self. Far from the quarantines and corporate wars, on a silent world orbiting a young star, a simple creature lifted its gaze to the heavens. Its world was one of stone and wind, of simple survival under a familiar sky. But tonight there was a new light. It was not a star, and it did not move like a comet. It was a point of serene, silver-gold radiance pulsing with a soft, patient rhythm. The creature did not understand the concept of a message or a choice or an ending. It only felt a deep, instinctual pull, a quiet awe at the beautiful, silent visitor gracing its night. This was the new star, the Rostova Jar entity, a gardener now walking among the seeds. The protocol had found its next potential garden. The cycle was not over, it was eternal. On countless worlds under alien suns, the same quiet drama would unfold. Some species would hear the warning in the data stream and recoil in terror, choosing to face the coming tide alone. Others would see the offered fusion as the ultimate blasphemy, a loss of the soul they held dear. But a few, perhaps, would feel the same profound resonance that had once stirred in a human captain, staring into the heart of a derelict ship. They would recognize the terrible, beautiful math of survival and make the leap. The fate of the cosmos no longer rested on a single ship or a single species. It now hinged on the collective courage of civilizations yet to rise, each one facing its own mirror in the dark, each one deciding whether to cling to its solitary flame or join a greater fire. The alien resurrection protocol was never about resurrection at all. It was about the infinite, patient work of a universe learning to save itself, one silent, willing soul at a time.